Welcome to today's Let's Do Lunch webinar. This is our 34th episode of Let's Do Lunch. My name is Paul Sweeting. I'm the host of the RightsTech Roundtable, which we do here every Thursday. I'm also filling in for Ned today on the opening. So before we get started, wanted to go over just a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your Zoom window, you'll see a Q&A icon, and if you click on that, it'll open a window and you can put in any question you want to address to the, either myself or our speaker today. There's also a chat icon at the bottom there that'll open a separate chat window where you'll be able to engage with other folks who are who are joining us today. If you do have a question, please make sure to put the question in the Q&A window, not the chat window, because we may miss it if it gets lost in the chat stream. Also, when you do open the chat window, at the bottom, you'll see a little drop down. It says all panelists. Please switch that to all panelists and attendees so that everybody can see your comments. I think that is it. This will be this is being recorded and will be archived and will be available within probably a few hours of when we're done here this afternoon on the dewexpo.com/webinar website. And so today we're going to be joined by Tobias Queisser of Cinelytic, and we'll get to that in a minute. I just wanted to go over a few news developments in the world of RightsTech this week. There was, as everybody knows, a lot of events, festivals, conferences have been canceled or postponed or put into suspended animation due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And some of those events have attempted to sort of recast themselves online as virtual events. And one of the events that was canceled is the Bologna Book Fair, which is normally held in March in northern Italy, which of course has been very hard hit. That book fair is a major rights fair for the children's book industry. And they launched a virtual version of the rights fair component to it. And they drew 60,000, which was held last week, and they drew 60,000 participants, which is about twice what they normally get for their in-person book fair. Which is pretty impressive, and 75% of those online participants were from outside of Italy, which is also much higher than they usually get. There were 500 publishers who registered and submitted 20,000 titles that were available for various translation rights and various other rights. And all in all, I think they'd have to regard that as a success. And it strikes me that that's a potential indication of what the future might hold for a lot of film festivals and other types of rights fairs that may find themselves going more virtual than physical in the future, just as people figure out that their companies figure out that they're able to do business in a virtual marketplace, and that may become a more permanent feature of the rights and licensing business than we might have guessed at the beginning of all this. Another interesting development was that, and it's quite relevant to what we're going to be discussing this afternoon, Disney this week announced that the highly anticipated film version of Hamilton the stage play featuring the original stage cast, which was slated for theatrical release next year, will now become available on the Disney Plus streaming service this July. So well ahead of the theatrical, the planned theatrical scheduling for that. And you know, I think that that's both a response to what's going on and also somewhat opportunistic on Disney's part, because they obviously see a highly anticipated film like that as a way of driving subscriptions to their direct-to-consumer platform, which is clearly becoming their priority across all of their filmed entertainment sectors. And I think that those sorts of shifts in studio priorities and consumer behavior that it's both chasing and driving are going to affect how we think about the finance and production process for a lot of types of movies and television work. So with that, let me invite Tobias to join us. Tobias is he's the co-founder and CEO of Cinelytic, which is a data analytics provider for the film industry, primarily film and television industry. It's an AI-driven, artificial intelligence-driven platform. Before that, he was in the movie production business himself. He was the founder of Arctic Pictures, which was a London-based film production company. And before that, he had a career in the world of finance, where he was an investment banker for a while and worked on a number of significant deals, and then founded his own investment fund, which was also based in London. He's now based in Los Angeles. So welcome, Tobias. Glad you could join us here today.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
So that was just a very brief description of Cinelytic. Why don't you just give us a little bit more detail as to exactly what Cinelytic does and who it does it for?
So Cinelytic started 4 years ago, and it is we call it a business intelligence platform. And the aim was to help industry executives or film professionals with smarter and faster decision, more informed and faster. And we do that by bringing and aggregating relevant data sources, whether it's box office, home video, TV, financial data, social media data, piracy data, whatever is relevant, and can give an insight in content value. We aggregate into a system, and then because, I mean, my background, as you mentioned, is 10 years in finance. You're very used to using data and systems to, inform your decisions when you evaluate companies or management teams. When I produce film, I realized, wow, film is a fantastic creative product, but from the business side perspective, a lot of tools that existed in other industries didn't exist. And so we wanted to build something in that vein, and I partnered with my CTO and co-founder, who was a rocket scientist at NASA for 17 years.
A literal rocket scientist.
A real rocket scientist. Yeah, he built risk assessment system for launch vehicles after the space shuttle. And so he also loved film, and he already thought of how to use his methodologies in the film industry. And then the third co-founder was a film producer for 20 years. Christian, our COO, spent 15 years with the studio. So we all have these diverse backgrounds of 10, 15 years in finance or tech, science, and especially, of course, in the film industry and from the studio and the independent perspective. And that knowledge we brought together to build this platform to really understand sort of which processes in the industry, especially when it comes to evaluating content early on, need to be improved. And then we went after it and built Cinelytic as a solution that digitizes workflow, that certain processes like running, analyzing talent, running some comms, predicting revenue, and running a financial model, something that might take 20 hours, now takes 20 minutes. And that's kind of the key part of the system. faster, so real-time information that's calculated in real time. That's what we use AI for the number crunching, and hopefully more accurate forecasting.
So it's interesting that you and your colleagues had this background in finance, as well as rocketry, before moving into the film area. And in finance, a big part, or one of the major components of that is doing risk analysis, and risk assessment of investments or allocations of capital. And that is of course, a very data-driven process. So what, how much of that is actually applicable to the world of film? I mean, is risk analysis,
in a certain
apples to apples transfer, or is it?
No, it's very important that, because we're talking about a creative product where it really only works if story is, story is king. I mean, that still is always the case, because if story doesn't work, the whole product might not work. And then of course it's a creative product, so you need to, it's not like maybe sometimes a company that's you can purely analyze the numbers. So there's certainly, there's something that you have to adapt, and that's why it was important that we actually combine people from finance with people in the entertainment industry to really find an interface where it makes sense. But to answer your question, yes, you can implement the same strategies and technologies that work in other industries to the creative industry, like the film industry. It happened in fashion, it happened in marketing very successfully. It didn't happen in film. And the reason often is that— What do you mean by
that? Let me stop you there. In what way did it happen in fashion?
Like just running data, like in fashion, understanding trends, what do consumers want? There's a lot of data collection, and brands use that to inform the decision making, and then combine their creative instinct with data analytics to be, successful. In the film industry, a lot of it is just, a lot of it is still very gut driven. And of course, a producer, a studio exec, whoever, wants to create a piece of content needs that kind of understanding what a good story is. But then the question is, how and what is the market for that story? You will need to know that early on, because, it's not good enough to just greenlight something or finance something where you think based on comms, like 5 comms you put together, or, gut feeling, to finance something for whatever, anywhere between 2 million to 200 million. I mean, it depends on film, right? It's a very expensive product and very risky product, because you have to finance it up front, then produce it, then release it. That might take 2 years. And then you go through theatrical, home video, TV, it might take another 2-3 years. So basically we're talking 5 years to recoup your investment. And that's, of course, a very, that's, in order to be a going concern, everyone has to risk mitigate or risk analyze, because how can you start a company in that kind of environment where you have to finance up front, recoup after 5 years without understanding the risk? Because, you need to, that's the real problem in the industry, in the independent industry, because not a lot of data is used. And we see like companies go bankrupt, every year. And there's really only a handful of companies that really were successful over more than 10, 20 years. In the independent space, in the studio world, is very different, of course, because they have way more ways to monetize, and they have different ways to finance, so they're in a much better position. But overall,
generally direct access to capital markets.
Direct access to capital markets, correct. And they do, of course, do analyses. And so we just looked at both spaces, and we said, this is what we see working well and not working well in the studio world and in the independent world, and this is how we're going to build a system. So we built a system with very much that in mind.
So what data are you actually looking at? Obviously, you can collect box office data. It's public. You're looking at streaming data, download data. What are you actually looking at?
We look at financial data. So our system uses financial data, meaning box office, home video, and TV data for film. So these kind of 3 window release model. We look at piracy as a proxy for OTT. We know that digital piracy, meaning like illegal streaming and downloading of content globally, correlates very high with legal OTT. Then we use social media data, if you look at talent. So there's a slew of different data sets that we use to bring into the system and then build insights. Because even data, you cannot. What can you do with a lot? If imagine you just get millions of data points. The question is, what do you do with it? That's the key. And that's where I think we build an expertise that can help that industry. Because the common perception, I think, is that, if you use data or AI, it will tell you that you have to do more franchises, more sequels, more prequels. And nothing could be further from the truth. That's one thing I always hear. And the question, you do that when you don't have a risk framework. Then you do that. You want to bank on established audiences that are based on an IP. But if you have risk frameworks that allow you to use systems like ours, you can actually really identify and analyze original content as well. And that's a direction that we hope this will go.
How open have you found the industry, the film industry, to be to the idea of applying sort of rigorous mathematical data analytics to creative processes, to creative people? How has that learning curve been for them? Or it's not really a learning curve, but how is that acceptance curve
There's
going?
a huge learning curve, of course, because especially in the film industry, there's no. I mean, when I came in this industry, I was shocked how little at the beginning of that process, and how far removed the consumer is, and how much you have to guess, right? And it was always that saying that the Andrew Goldsmith, and nobody knows anything, and everybody was kind of happy with that because a lot of companies benefited from transparency. And in the days, I mean, what I can do is I can show a few data points, because I love to.
Yeah, that's where I was leading with this. What can you referenced William Goldman, the famous the screenwriter who wrote a memoir, Adventures in the Screen Trade, in which he declared that in Hollywood nobody knows anything, meaning nobody really knows in advance what's going to work. So what is it? And of course, he was writing in the 70s and the 80s and didn't have access to AI-driven data analytics. So what is it possible to know?
He is still right in a lot of aspects, especially in the creative sense. There's a lot of alchemy that has to happen. You can put all the right ingredients into a pot, but you never know what comes out of it, right? So there is a certain level of alchemy to the whole process. But just by having enough data to understanding sort of consumer trends, consumer demands, where your audience is the budget the right size? How can I finance that budget? And really analyzing these things from the get-go. Not only, don't think about distribution when you want to distribute, when the film is shot. Think of distribution at step A, when you put money down, or when you think of putting money down. Think of your target audience, think how to market to them. And really, we provide data sets or insights really in the system that help you understand that. And I don't know if you can see the graph I'm sharing here.
Yeah.
The revenue graph, right?
Yes.
And this is something, very urgent, because especially in, let's say, the traditional film industry, 10 years ago, DVD revenues were $16 billion, right? And that created an industry where you knew that eventually a film will kind of break even. That changed. DVD revenues collapsed basically to $4 billion. Now, digital, the one you see, the light blue one, never picked up the loss of the physical, right?
Right.
That means there's a huge gap in terms of revenue. Yes, streaming came up strong, especially the last 5 years, but it's mostly tech companies that benefit from that. So while box office is steady, general revenues available to recoup film investment decrease quite dramatically. What that means is there's just less money to go around. What that also means is margins are slim. And that led to certain changes in the industry. As we can see, now, last year, 93% of the industry was dominated by the majors and mini majors. The independent industry shrunk to 7%. That was like 15% a couple of years back. And the reason is that, when margins get slim, what you do is the big ones, they got into IP, and they, in order to risk mitigate, wanted to get, build large franchises.
Very conservative in their choices about what to
produce. Correct. And in the independent industry, it was extremely difficult to get any space in the theaters, you know, because the power from these big companies was very strong. And on the other side, the streaming world, it was tech companies benefiting from it. That chart is almost not that up to date. It's, you know,
I don't
it's
see Disney Plus on there.
Disney Plus should be on there and so on. This has been an older chart, but nevertheless, I mean, there's still, you know, Amazon and Netflix together are still the majority of that market. And so that what we saw is that creates an issue in the industry. There's rapid change going on. When things change quickly, you need even more information to understand what's going on, right? Because a lot of companies wonder, especially independent space, why is it so tough to make money? Why is it tough to raise money for film? Yeah, because investors, most smart investors, it's not enough for them to just, you know, get 3 comms and a nice story. They want a bit more than that. And also, on the other hand, distribution just got incredibly difficult. Like, look at Sundance, how few films get picked up and released theatrically in the last year. So, you know, there are certain reasons why things go this way, and we use data to kind of help with that. And especially, as I mentioned, you know, in terms of business methods, the industry is very old school. Any analysis takes a long time. Data is very scattered. Yes, you can get box office, but it's tough to get any ancillary revenue window data. And so we wanted to improve the technology that, you know, the business methods in industry. And then when you look at that value chain, you know, in the studios integrate step 1 to 4, but it's often very siloed in different departments, and data and insights are not shared. And in the industry, we have literally 7 different, or 5 to 7 different companies carrying a film from script to screen that have completely different business methods, completely different incentives. So it's very difficult to, on gut feel especially, finance something here and then release it to the crowd here. I mean, that's where the disconnect is. And that's why with Cinelytic, you know, what we did is this is just an overview page. We created a system where you have a lot of different tools, like an office suite, that you can use to inform that value chain with the same consistent level of information. I hope that explains it better, because I know it's always very abstract to talk about these things. And that's why I thought maybe to share these slides with you to show them.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, it'd be too much to say you're actually normalizing data from all of those different stages, but you're integrating them in some way that allows.
We're integrating them, yes, and we're building tools. Let's say, you know, let's go. Maybe you want to know something about talent. We have a talent tool, which is where we track 550,000 actors, directors, writers, producers globally, and we have a lot of metadata for each of that talent. And we can create insights from that. So we don't throw data at people, because it's a lot of data, of course, but we convert the data and insights, and now we created economic insights, economic scores.
So if I'm a producer and I'm sitting there with my casting director, we could plug different talent into this system and get a real-time read on how that might impact a revenue for
Correct. That's one of the tools. Yeah, correct. That's the predictive forecasting tool. This tool that you see here is literally just, you know, replacing, you know what, when I was a producer, like talent lists, you get like a Word document with 20 names on it, and then you know 3 of them, but then, you know, somebody has to come up with, so which films did they do lately? Show me their box office figures. So somebody has to, over days or hours, come up with some figures, do it manually, and wait, what is the social media following? We just aggregated everything, created scores, so now we can score 550,000 people by their country value, by their economic genre value, by their media value. We have social media tracking, everything available in seconds. So when you decide, and of course the creative decision is always the key one, but when you want to know more about, hey, how can that person help us with marketing? Or hey, how does she have experience in action thrillers, or is she a drama actor? Or, you know, you can, next to your creative mind, add data points and value scores to it to understand, hey, what does the hard data say about that particular actor? Especially if you pay these, you know, some of them a lot, you want to know if they drive performance or not. And that's kind of one tool we offer, you know, just to help with that whole process of running talent lists and getting ideas. You know, running a search here takes seconds. Like, show me all actresses aged 25 to 35, strong in drama in the United States, and then add whatever CAA or UTA, and the system shows you these names.
So is it possible to quantify the impact of using your platform here. By what percentage could I reduce my investment risk in a
Yeah,
project? Can you
it's
look at it that way even?
yeah, no, it's yes, of course. I mean, there are two ways we look at it. One is you can work, I would say, around 20 times faster because we know how long it will take to analyze talent or to run a comp list, a proper comp list of not 3 films but 20 films, and then draw medians and averages and look at release patterns, look at what pattern worked in the past, what didn't work. So this is now auto-generated and visualized, and this normally takes the whole thing in the system to run a full project at least 20 hours to run talent analysis, comms, predictive forecasting, and a financial model. In our system, you can do it in 20 minutes. So there's that saving, that time saving that you can quantify. And then in terms of forecasting, of course, we have accuracy ratings that where we can show that we're 85% plus accurate on sort of in overall with a predictive forecasting tool. Because maybe I tell you a little bit more about the predictive forecasting tool. So running comms, we just improved the way you run comms. That we have 90,000 films in our database, and we have a filter system, so you can very quickly find relevant comms, and then you auto-derive analyses and per territory forecasts from it. But I think the most interesting, the most talked about tool that we offer is our predictive forecasting tool here. And this one, just to give you an idea how we use AI and how it can really benefit as a prototyping system, because I think that's kind of the new way of analyzing that we bring to the film.
New kid on the block, as it were.
Exactly, that's the other things we improve and speed up and make and deepen and make it more methodical. This one didn't exist before we built it. And so here our data scientists went through a lot of films over the last years and analyzed what from purely mathematical and statistical perspective drives film performance in terms of project attributes. Is it the budget? Is it the lead actor, the director, is it the genre? Is it the IP? Is it the franchise? Is it the release size, timing? So of course there are maybe 30 factors, and we identified 19 that are really relevant. At different.
Not giving away too many trade secrets. Can you share which ones those are?
Well, they're here on the left. So it's on the left. If you look at these, it's like budget, genre, rating, whether it's a sequel, whether it's a franchise. The key talent, of course, actor, director, writer, producer, that is obviously very important. And then the release timing and sizing. And so what you can do in the system, you can input this, even if it's just a development stage, and you just want to get a gauge of it, you can input these attributes into our system here. You press a button, and then within seconds, a forecast is generated that shows revenues, and we forecast the base case, which is the median, the most probable scenario. It means this will happen at potential with all these 19 attributes. The nice thing is we're not using like the old methods of correlations or the old methods of running some linear regressions where everything has a weighting. No, the system starts at 0, understands what that project is, because an actor like Robert Downey Jr. has a different value as Iron Man than he has in a $10 million drama, for example. So the system takes all these factors always from scratch. That's the purpose of AI. That's why humans they wouldn't be able to calculate these things. It takes this project that you input in the screen, understands what it is, and runs against all our data and sees patterns. So it doesn't do Monte Carlo analysis, what people did 5 years ago. It's neural networks that go through and analyze patterns and then give a forecast that's most probable. And that's the base forecast. We provide box office, digital, physical, home video, and TV revenue forecasts, ultimates, domestic and international. And of course, there's a base case, the most probable, but we know there's a certain amount of alchemy and whatever creative execution. And we leave other, a range here and scenarios that executives can then choose if they feel their film turns out better or worse than expected. So we have sort of, if you want, you can override. If you see, there's a certain, something happens on set that's either better or worse than the norm. Or you can rerun certain aspects of it. So there are different ways, because this is not a crystal ball. This is just a tool that we give to executives to make their own decisions and make their minds up.
Who has been most receptive to this? Is it the major studios? Is it the independent producers? Is it financiers? Who have you had the most gotten the most traction with?
So early on, it was the financiers, because in the independent sense, because the studios, it always takes a bit longer. The decision-making process is more complex. So the initial were financiers, but now we have independent financiers. We have mini majors, we have majors as clients. We have independent distribution companies as clients. Now we have a real.
Not too long ago with Warner, right?
Yes, correct. Warner Pictures International Sign. So we have like majors, mini majors, as well as independent companies using the system, and it's, it's not a crystal ball that overrules anything. It's just another tool that gives people, hopefully more confidence or less confidence, or gives them better insight into what this project can mean. Because once you establish the revenue forecast, either by comms or by predictive tool, you can then run a waterfall and just see what the profit and loss can look like for this particular film. But most importantly is really, like, I think my favorite part of the system that it creates a completely different style of working. In the old days, you have an idea, somebody has to run some numbers, you have to wait for that, the numbers come up. Hey, let's change the actor. Okay, let me get back to you in 2 days. You have to stop. This now puts everything into real time, right? And so you sit in a meeting, it's a multi-user system. You can really work on this together to figure things out together. And I think that's where the benefit really is of the system.
So this is a business, the film business, the film and television business, that is changing rapidly, both in terms of consumer behavior. Obviously, these are unusual conditions now, but to some extent, that's probably accelerating shifts in consumer behavior that were already underway.
Yeah.
The studios, at least the major studios, the major media companies, priorities and incentives are shifting somewhat, as they make major investments in direct-to-consumer platforms. That's changing how they assess the market, essentially, for their works, and where the market will be most beneficial to them. It changes, it changes where they see their biggest ROI. How much, what do those shifts mean for someone like Cinelytic, who is building tools that are based on integrating data? Have you had to look for different sources of data? Have you had to tweak your algorithms to accommodate these shifts? How have the changes in the film industry affected your business?
So of course, in our models, these trends into the futures are built in. So when we do a prediction for the year 2021, the changes between physical, digital, home video that we project in the future are taken into account. That of course, the digital revenue will be higher than the physical next year than they are this year, and even more the year after. So these general macro trends of the industry are baked into the system. Alternatively, of course, in terms of streaming data, Netflix and Disney Plus and HBO, they don't share streaming. They don't share their data really in a broader sense. And we looked into alternative data sets that we can gauge the demand, the streaming demand. And that's what I mentioned at the beginning. We found that illegal piracy, so illegal streaming and downloading of content, technically piracy, digital piracy, correlates very high with legal demand. So illegal streaming and illegal downloading online correlates very high, not with TV or with OTT.
So where do you get that piracy data from?
So we developed the technology, and we are collecting it ourselves as our proprietary data.
So you're engaging in copyright infringement and downloading films illegally. Is that what you're saying?
No, we don't download anything. We just monitor.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, that would be. No, of course, we are against piracy because it does terrible damage to the industry.
But it is a proxy of sorts for.
But we monitor. So it's kind of us. We develop technology that we can globally, in every country in the world, monitor. We collect data on 120 million transactions daily. Wow. And these transactions express basically what people demand globally. And Let me see, because I'm not on my computer. Otherwise, I could, let me see if I can share something. Maybe I can share. Okay, and I have actually something here. So let me share something here, and you share. Hope it works. Yeah, can you see this chart?
Yes.
So this is an overview of, we created that just for the second month of the quarantine. So April 11 to May 10, so pretty recent, last month basically. And we looked into what works in terms of illegal content demand during these 4 weeks. And you see like Bad Boys for Life does very well. Trolls World Tour, which was of course released straight to VOD, does very well. Films like Bloodshot with shortened windows and Sonic and so on, all these short window titles did very well. Extraction, which is only live since 10 days, does phenomenally well. It did actually, in recent days, it was trending #1. This is now the whole month, so it only was released for the last 2 weeks. But you can see, basically, get an idea of what people watch digitally, right? They do that for film as well as for TV. So you can see Westworld was very popular. Of course, the classic, all the new stuff basically that was released. Westworld was newly released. Better Call Saul, Walking Dead had a new season, I think, or Star Trek, Homeland had a new season. The Last Dance also only out for I think 2 weeks. Very strong, of course. Mandalorian still running. So you can basically see what people are watching, and this gives you a great idea, especially. You can see how different HBO stacks up versus other content providers, basically. This is the kind of data we use for establishing that OTT demand.
Okay, we're coming up on our time window here, and we have a lot of questions that I'd like to try to get
Sure.
to. We also have an audience poll, which I'm not seeing at the moment. So Laura, perhaps you could, there it is. So it's a three question poll. If people want to fill that out, we'll reveal the results at the end here. But while you're working on that, let me try to get to it, some of these questions. First of all, I have one of my own, which is, if people wanted to get the deck that you've been working from, would they be able to get that from you with some of the slides that you've shown today?
Sure. Yeah, I can I could, yes. Not for wide distribution, but for maybe. So
okay, well, we can take that up later. Patty Jones, do you think this type of analytics, AI-driven analytics, could be applied to other types of creative properties, music, books, even sports?
Yeah, no, I definitely do. And we right now, we focus on film, and it's definitely probably not even the best use of it. And it's very hard to sell it in industry because there is a lot of reservations, and there's a lot of education from our part that this is nothing that impedes creativity or is a robot that makes movies. So yeah, I think we're looking into further verticals, so that down the line that we now focus on film and TV, but we will also look into other industries. And I think we need an industry that has data. That's key. We need good data. As long as there's good data, we can build workflow and predictive solutions like this.
Mm-hmm. And Laurel Meredith, I guess you sort of just covered that. Your analytics could apply to television as well, correct? And Tool, who's using this system? What kind of independent funding sources are using it? Are they using it to decide what to invest in?
Yeah, I mean, they use it as an alternative method to their own methods, because most companies, especially financiers, they have methods in establishing value, and they use this as an alternative method for to make decisions, and that's what it's built for. It's sort of an information system for these parties, and they make investing.
Anonymous attendee wants to know. Not sure we should answer an anonymous question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. When talking about AI, it seems that the biggest discussion about it in 2020 circles around bias and ethics in AI. How do you deal with with bias and ethics in your system?
You know,
Or is it really even a factor in your system?
the way we deconstruct a film project to these 19 factors means that you can really assess. That's the kind of fear question people say, yeah, the system will just tell you that Marvel films or films with whatever certain ethnicities work well, but that's not really true. For example, films with ethnic minorities did very well the last years, and so the system can really show that. You know, so in the end, I don't believe there's always a certain bias, but the way we build the system, we deal with most biases. So in terms of our system, I can say that the bias is an absolute minimum and much less than it is currently in industry with people deciding what they think will work or not. Because data, in a way, if you have a large data set, is fairly unbiased or less biased than most people are. So it's just what you make of it. In our system, the way we use the data and deconstruct it into many different moving parts that then come together, we can really prototype content, and so that it works really well for all kinds of content.
Judy Havas, interesting question. How does this relate to the sort of innovation that Netflix brought to the business with you know, using data, their own proprietary data, to make decisions about what to produce? Is that, they're not really using, well, we don't really know that much about what you know, what parameters they're looking at in that, but is this sort of similar to what Netflix is known to be doing? Is it more powerful? Is it an extension of what Netflix is doing?
So I wouldn't be able to comment on what Netflix is using because I really don't know. But from what I gather is they use technology to accelerate workflow, and that's kind of the core thing they use technologies for, to get rid of bottlenecks and to decentralize their chain of command. Because right now, in many film studios, the chain of command is like this, and of course that limits the things you can decide. And I think what Netflix does very smartly is, and that's how this is, I think, I mean, I'm not by no means an expert, but the way that they can produce so much content you need to have a fairly decentralized command chain, and you need to have tools that can accelerate that kind of workflow and decision making. So I'm sure they use technology in a way to speed up workflow and decision making in a similar way that we do, but I cannot comment on it more specifically than that because I don't know what they do exactly.
Mm-hmm. August Miller, why did you decide to go from finance to filmmaking? And
I was actually always a lover of film. I did I was directing short films when I was in my teens, so I always loved film. And for some reason, I was always, you know, I wanted to go in film, but I ended up in finance in the end for 10 years. But then it was always my dream to work in film. And then when I worked in film, I realized that I can bring the knowledge that I acquired in finance and maybe help with the business side, because I felt, especially in an independent world where I worked, it was pretty horrific. And I mean, I think in my article that I wrote, I showed you that Netflix, that chart about Sundance, that every year $3 billion US dollars worth of production spend applied to Sundance, and the total theatrical net revenues. So let's say 2019 applications to Sundance, $3 billion. The total net revenues in the US 2019, 100 million. We had 800 million box office. If you take out the exhibitor, keeping 50%, you stay at 400 million. And then with distribution fees and marketing, you're down to like 100 million. And that's crazy.
100 million net revenue on an investment of 3 billion.
On theatrical, and then maybe add some ancillary, yeah, you might be 200 million, but it's still like, that's why we see that only 3 to 4% of independent film recoup their investment, which is pretty crazy. Yeah, that's the long-winded story. But I loved film; it was a passion, and now I hope to, or our company hopes to, bring some other, insights from other industries into the industry.
Steve LeBlanc, interesting question. We sort of touched on this, but let's go back to it. When you present this to creative people and to studio executives, or a lot of them, do you get the sense that they're on the same page as you regarding these data, or do they see this as somehow a potential impingement or infringement on their creative visions?
It always depends on the person you speak to. There are certainly people that are more open to tech, and especially AI. I mean, everybody on this call uses AI every day. When you switch on your mobile, you use AI. When you use Waze, you use AI. So it's just, and that's why when we talk to certain studio, certain people at the studio are very open to understanding, okay, we want to improve how we work. We want to improve, we want to be better for the company, and we want the company to be better, and we can definitely help with that. And then we have a very nice conversation. Sometimes there is, the factor that, of course, some people are not that familiar with technology, and there's see it as a threat potentially. So for us, it's always about educating and telling them that this is just a tool that can support them in a way. But yeah, there's always, it's always a mix.
One of the main reasons that the studios or their parent companies are moving so aggressively into direct to consumer is in order to have access to a lot more data that they can use.
And access to the consumer, correct.
Right.
And now they need the systems, because in the end, data is good, but you need a process and a framework to use that data. And that's what we deliver, and that's what we want to build for the industry, which we are building for the industry. It's very important to have a risk framework, because you can have a lot of data, but if you don't use it or not use it in the wrong way, it doesn't make any sense.
We're coming up against our deadline here. Laura, I'm having problems with the poll. I'm not seeing the results. Are you? There we go. The ever helpful Laura behind the scenes. That's her hiding there behind the Digital Media Wire logo. She's shy. So we asked folks, where are you placed in the business, basically? What's your involvement in the industry? The largest group, a little over a third, are in the distribution layer. Everyone else, all the other layers are pretty evenly represented: pre-production, finance, production, including creatives, and administrative, business affairs, back office affairs are all right around 15–16%. There's 19% out there who have no professional involvement. I guess they're like you, just movie fans, or perhaps they're from allied industries. In which part of the film financing and production process do you think data analytics can have the biggest impact? And all of the above was the overwhelming choice. There was 65%, but financial modeling, about 30%, 29% said financial modeling, budgeting, ROI forecasting, and so forth. That was the next biggest one at 29%. Box office forecasting up there. Everybody else said pretty much any part.
And I have to agree with that, because you can really apply it to many different parts depending on what data set. And
right. And we also asked people the sort of creative question: do you think data analytics will impact, or how do you think it'll impact creative decision making? And we have a lot of people who are very open to new ways of doing things out there, because
that's nice.
The biggest choice by far was that it will improve creative decision making. Only about a quarter of folks said it might limit or degrade creative decisions. So it sounds like you have a pretty open space to run into there at Cinelytic.
That's fantastic. I mean, it's definitely, there is that common perceptions of what this year when we had certain announcements, there was a lot of like, oh my God, it's going to be Terminator deciding which movies to make and that kind of stuff. And of course, it's not really, that's not the reality at all. I mean, we are very much, I'm a creative producer. I love original content. And I think a system like ours can really help companies find frameworks to risk assess original content again. And that's kind of where we hope that we can benefit the industry.
Okay, we could talk about this all day, but unfortunately we don't have all day. So I want to thank you very much, Tobias. This was a very interesting talk. We are going to be circling back to issues around AI and creative decision making in some upcoming episodes. We're going to be talking to some folks who actually do script analysis via AI and some other things, but we'll be getting to those in future webinars. RightsTech Roundtable will actually be on break next week due to the LA Games Conference, a virtual 3-day conference that Digital Media Wire is hosting. And Ned, who do we have up tomorrow for Business of Music?
Tomorrow we have Jeff Ponchik, Jeff's president and head of Repost at SoundCloud, and he'll be speaking with my colleague Joe Anderson from Annette.
Great. And I'm sorry to those whose questions we didn't get to. There were quite a lot of them this week, so feel free to reach out to Tobias at Cinelytic, and we'll be back week after next on May 28th.
And about the deck, we'll talk after, and I can send you maybe a version of the deck that you can share.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Tobias.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.